Hi there. Sorry, I'm home with my kids. Yeah, so thank you, Paula, for coming and chatting with us today. I'm really interested in this topic. For everyone, Paula joined us just over the last year as part of our wheelchair research team. And I'm just very excited to see the work that she's done and that she brings to us here as part of Rehab Research. So thank you so much for being here today.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. And thanks so much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here to be able to share a little bit of the work that I'm doing on pediatric manual wheelchair skills training. And I'm going to take a moment here to share my screen. Can someone confirm for me that they can see the slide on the screen? I can't see anyone anymore. I can only see the slide. So if you can speak up, that would be great.
Yeah, it's showing, Paula.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So again, thank you very much for this invitation. Some of the people on the call know me. A lot of the people I think don't know me. I am an occupational therapist by background. In January, as Suzanne said, I started at Dalhousie University within the context of associate professor and director of the School of Occupational Therapy. Just prior to that, I was at the University of Montreal as an associate professor in their occupational therapy program and at CHU St. Justine Research Center, which is a pediatric research center, and Marie Enfant Rehab Center doing my program of research there. And much more distantly, I was an occupational therapist in Halifax at Nova Scotia Health at the Nova Scotia Rehab Center from 1999 to 2006. So it's a little bit of background about me. So I've come back home basically in coming to Dal. Right now, I'm actually currently in Montreal. And so I'm going to give the land acknowledgement for Montreal and the University of Montreal, which is situated on land where long before the arrival of the French, many people of many Indigenous nations came together and interacted. And the University of Montreal wishes to acknowledge these nations, their descendants, in the spirit of fraternity that presided over the signing in 1701 of the Great Peace of Montreal. It's a treaty that fostered peaceful relationships between France, its Indigenous allies, and the Haudenosaunee Federation. The spirit of fraternity that inspired this treaty serves as a model for the University of Montreal university community. Just before I continue, is everyone hearing me okay?
Yes, we hear you fine, Paula.
Perfect, thanks. So just a few disclosures to start. I have no non-financial or financial relationships to disclose. In terms of content, the core content that will be presented within the context of this presentation is around the Wheelchair Skills Program, that of course comes out of Dalhousie University and the Nova Scotia Rehab Center with Lee Kirby and his team. And the primary sources of funding for the studies that I will be sharing are FRQS, which is provincial funding in the province of Quebec, CIHR, and the Child Bright Foundation. The learning objectives for our session today are presented on this slide. I hope that after this presentation, you will be able to identify 3 positive impacts related to wheelchair skills training on children and adolescents. List 3 important ingredients to include in a wheelchair skills training intervention to facilitate pediatric motor learning and active engagement, and describe 2 innovative approaches and/or resources for delivering wheelchair skills training to this population. Children require mobility for their day-to-day activities. As you'll see in this short video, these little guys are describing and showing us how mobility helps them in their day-to-day life for exploring their environment, for social interactions, for play, of course, for self-care, for playing outdoors, for physical activity, both indoors and outdoors. So I think we all realize, I think a lot of people on the call today probably have children. We all realize that independent mobility is very important for children. It, of course, helps with function. It helps with social participation, personal fulfillment, and the development of milestones. As well, it can reduce caregiver burden and generally increase health and quality of life for both the children and their support system. Wheelchair mobility is a complex activity. There are many children worldwide who need a wheelchair to become independently mobile. And the complexity of this activity is around the interaction that happens between the child. So for example, their physical, their cognitive, their affective attributes, the occupations that they would like to do in their wheelchair. So those things that we just saw those children doing in the short video before this slide. So playing, self-care, can be more productivity activities related to going to school, to shopping, those types of things, the job as children move into adolescence, and of course, the environment in which they do these activities. And so you can see on the right-hand side of the screen that this pediatric manual wheelchair user is using her chair in more of a rural area where she's probably on a bit of a soft surface, uneven terrain, maybe negotiating some physical obstacles. And so the environment can very much impact the level of independence in a wheelchair as well. So the interaction of the child, their occupations or chosen activities in the environment can dictate how independent a child is, as well, of course, as the wheelchair itself and its configuration and components. What we do know is that children and adolescents do have difficulties using their wheelchairs. The vast majority of children who are manual wheelchair users require assistance from their parents to be mobile both indoors and outdoors. There are many injuries, both acute and chronic, for pediatric manual wheelchair users, largely caused by tips and falls. And we know that when someone starts to use a wheelchair early on in life, the efficiencies with which they use their wheelchair can impact moving into adolescence and adulthood and older adulthood. So for example, if a child doesn't use the proper propulsion techniques, that can impact their upper extremities and can result in chronic, for example, shoulder injury. So in terms of us as healthcare professionals, what we can do to help address children's difficulties using their wheelchairs is to ensure that they have adequate wheelchair skills training. In April of this year, the World Health Organization released the new wheelchair service standards. In these new standards, they now recommend a 4-step wheelchair service provision process. So select, fit, use, and follow up. And wheelchair skills training falls into step 3, use of the wheelchair. And it's considered by the World Health Organization to be an essential service. And of course, personal mobility is a fundamental human right, as dictated by the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. We are fortunate in that we have the Wheelchair Skills Program out of Dalhousie University. And this program has been in existence since 1996. It's an evidence-based program that looks at the testing and the training of wheelchair skills for manual wheelchair users, powered wheelchair users, and scooter users, as well as caregivers and clinicians. And so the skills that are represented in the Wheelchair Skills Program are meant to be those that wheelchair users encounter or they need to use on a day-to-day basis. So for example, anything from moving forwards and backwards in the wheelchair to more community-based skills such as going up and down ramps and curbs to more advanced skills such as doing a wheelie to negotiate steep inclines and coming down off high-level changes, for example. I think probably most people on the call are very familiar with the Wheelchair Skills Program, and so I won't speak more about that, but what you're seeing on this slide is the homepage of the website, and there's a lot of resources on this website for anyone looking to learn further about it, and there's also lots of videos on the Wheelchair Skills Program YouTube channel. And so when I began working at the University of Montreal and the CHU Saint-Justine Research Center, the occupational therapists in the Rehab Center and the affiliated specialized schools were very keen once they learned that I had a knowledge base in wheelchair skills training and interest in that area. They were very keen to implement the Wheelchair Skills Program in their settings, in the Rehab Center and in the specialized schools. which aligned perfectly with my interests, my knowledge, and how I wanted to move my program of research. And so at that time, which is now back in 2014, 2015, I thought, perfect, okay, so we'll use the knowledge to action framework, which is what you see on the slide here, which is a 7-step process going from identifying the knowledge to action gap all the way through to sustaining knowledge use. In the center of this framework, you can see the knowledge creation component in this upside down triangle. Let me put my pointer on here. And so in terms of knowledge creation, we look at knowledge inquiry. So that's really the building the base of evidence around using an intervention, knowledge synthesis in terms of synthesizing the evidence that exists, and then the development of knowledge tools and products. And within this knowledge creation portion, the idea is that we tailor the knowledge about an intervention, in this case, the wheelchair skills program, to be more and more refined for the ultimate users in a given context. So in this case, it was clinicians and pediatric manual wheelchair users at a pediatric rehab center and specialized schools in Montreal. The master student that I had at the time, Geneviève Daou, started this knowledge to action process with step 1 of first identifying, okay, is there a knowledge to action gap among occupational therapists here? She conducted 2 different surveys. One survey was with occupational therapists. This is what you see on the left-hand side of the screen, and one was with pediatric manual wheelchair users and their parents on the right-hand side. So I've just pulled just a couple of results from this survey to give you the highlights for us in terms of results from this project. We had a sample size of 36 occupational therapists complete the survey, which was most of the OTs in the rehab center and the schools. What I want to highlight from the results of this particular survey is that clinicians were 17 out of 36 were always training pediatric manual wheelchair users basic mobility skills. Only 2 were always training community skills and none were training advanced skills. If we move over to the never side, we can see that 23 of 36 were never training advanced skills to pediatric manual wheelchair users. It's very similar results for the caregivers. So what we're seeing there is that practice is really inconsistent in terms of providing wheelchair skills training to children who use wheelchairs. And it's really focused primarily on basic wheelchair skills. So moving forwards, backwards, turning the wheelchair, that type of thing. What we see in the right-hand graph on this slide is that children and their caregivers, if they don't receive training, they don't necessarily learn these skills on their own. So in this graph, the orange is the wheelchair user and the yellow is the caregiver. And what we see here is that on the left-hand side, the skills with which the wheelchair users and their caregivers are having difficulty. So everything from rolling forward long distances to soft surfaces, ramps, and stairs. So those are the types of skills, the basic community and advanced skills that pediatric manual wheelchair users and their caregivers are challenged with. So this study really told us that yes, there is a gap between the existing evidence and the knowledge and the clinical practice of occupational therapists in that setting. That was expected, given that the OTs had said, okay, we would like to move forward in improving our practice in this area. So that was expected. The next step in our process for the master student Geneviève Daou was to look at adapting the wheelchair skills program to this local context and identifying the barriers and the facilitators. So she conducted focus groups with the OTs that were working in the school systems and the rehab center, and I've pulled out some highlights from this study as well. On the left-hand side of this table, we can see the challenges that were identified by the OTs. Many of the OTs identified that they actually avoided training children community and advanced skills. They were concerned about safety. When they looked to the literature, they didn't see literature that supported training young children these more community and advanced skills. And so if we look at the knowledge creation levels from that upside down triangle and the knowledge to action framework, this really identifies that we had work to do at the inquiry and the synthesis level. And so our research team proposed the solutions of conducting a randomized controlled trial, as well as reviews of the systematic and scoping nature, when there was sufficient evidence to do so. Occupational therapists also identified that they needed a more playful approach in order to deliver wheelchair skills training to children. They felt that in order to keep them engaged, keep them motivated, they needed something much more playful. And so this comes again down to the inquiry level of creating knowledge and evidence to provide wheelchair skills training in this way, as well as the development of products that are tailored for clinicians working in pediatrics and the pediatric manual wheelchair users themselves. And so our proposed solutions were to trial a novel training approach and to develop creative, more fun pediatric resources. The occupational therapists also identified that the wheelchair skills program manual at that time was lacking in details that were specific to pediatrics. So for example, taking into account developmental milestones, taking into account motor learning principles that maybe worked for adults but not for pediatrics. And so our solution for that was to add the special considerations for children components to the manual. Which is definitely in line with how the manual is currently created in terms of having special considerations for other populations of wheelchair users, such as those with spinal cord injury and those with, let's say, hemiplegia. They also identified that the WSP manual is difficult to access and really distill the information that's important for training children. And so we proposed the development of a condensed pediatric-specific version of the Wheelchair Skills Program manual. If there's anyone on the call who hasn't referred to the Wheelchair Skills Program manual, it's a very comprehensive manual. I think at this point we're at almost 320 pages. So it's super comprehensive, and for a very busy practicing clinician, it can be difficult to pull out the information quickly that's needed for training. And so in looking at how we could adapt the knowledge and really assessing some barriers and facilitators to implementing the Wheelchair Skills Program in pediatric settings, our research team really looked at this knowledge to action model again and said, okay, rather than continuing along this 7-step process, what we really need to do is go back to the knowledge creation. We really need to go back to the knowledge inquiry, synthesis, and the development of targeted tools for the pediatric population. And the clinicians were right. If we look at the evidence, there are currently 74, I checked the website yesterday, the Wheelchair Skills Program website, there's currently 74 articles that demonstrate the effectiveness of the Wheelchair Skills Training Program. Of those 74 articles, only 4 relate specifically to pediatrics. Of the 117 articles that include the Wheelchair Skills Test or Wheelchair Skills Test questionnaire, only 1 is specific to looking at the measurement properties for children. So the clinicians were definitely accurate in terms of wanting more evidence to support using this particular intervention in their practice. And on this slide, you can see the 4 studies that do involve training children using the Wheelchair Skills Training Program. And you can see that these studies were small in nature, so there was a small sample size. They were single group studies, pre-post studies, but we can see that there were significant results, so positive influence of using the Wheelchair Skills Training Program in pediatrics. If we flip back to the knowledge to action framework again and look at knowledge synthesis, it's just to say that there's 1 systematic review of the Wheelchair Skills Training Program. It did not include any articles on pediatrics, and another review that included primarily Wheelchair Skills Training Program articles that also didn't include articles in pediatrics. And so we are lacking in that. Of course, we need to do those studies and publish that information before we're able to do the synthesis. And then since the establishment of the Wheelchair Skills Program in '96, the vast majority of the tools and products, including things like posters and videos and whatnot, are specific to the adult and older adult population. So there's opportunity as well to develop tools specific to pediatrics. And so what I'll present for you in these next few slides is how we address the knowledge inquiry, the knowledge synthesis, as well as the development of knowledge products and tools in ongoing studies, as well as recently completed studies. And so for knowledge inquiry, we're currently conducting a randomized control trial that's looking at the effectiveness of the Wheelchair Skills Training Program among pediatric manual wheelchair users. And last summer, we conducted a study of an inclusive pediatric dance camp that included wheelchair skills training. And I'll tell you a little bit about these two studies. So the randomized control trial is a 3-site study. And we have researchers from University Laval in Quebec City, from Dalhousie here in Halifax, as well as from the University of Montreal in Montreal, as well as a researcher from University of Toronto and several graduate students on this project. The primary objective of this project is to test the hypothesis that children and adolescents who receive the wheelchair skills training program will have higher manual wheelchair skills capacity compared to children and adolescents in the control group who receive usual care. We also have secondary hypotheses around looking at the impact of the wheelchair skills training program on things like wheelchair activity, using accelerometers, wheelchair use self-efficacy or confidence using a measure called the WheelCon, as well as satisfaction with participation in wheelchair use goals using the wheelchair outcome measure or the WHOM, for example. It is a multi-site, parallel group, single-blind, randomized, waitlist controlled trial, and we are targeting 20 pediatric manual wheelchair users from the 3 different sites in Halifax, Montreal, and Quebec City for a total sample size of 60. On the right-hand side of this slide, you can see our procedure. All 3 sites are recruiting in more or less the same way. It's typically recruiting through occupational therapists who are seeing pediatric manual wheelchair users. The baseline data collection involves using the measures of the wheelchair skills test, the wheelchair skills test questionnaire, as well as those that I just mentioned, accelerometers, the WheelCon, and the WHOM. After time 1 data collection, the participants are, of course, allocated to either the experimental or the control group. In the experimental group, the pediatric manual wheelchair users receive 12 45 to 60-minute wheelchair skills training sessions, while the control waitlist control group waits for 3 months. Then we have the time 2 data collection, after which time the waitlist control group received the same training, and then we have time 3 data collection looking at retention after 3 months. And so this study is really going to help us understand if the wheelchair skills training program is truly effective for pediatric manual wheelchair users. And so that study addresses the concerns and the challenges that clinicians have around really wanting some evidence to support using the wheelchair skills training program. And so this next study around the inclusive dance camp that includes wheelchair skills training, this study was to address the concern around providing a more fun, a more motivating and engaging way to train wheelchair skills. And so this is a study with collaborators from UQAM, the Université de Québec Montréal, CHU Saint-Justine Research Center, University of Montreal, as well as University of Laval and their Rehab Research Center, CRIS. This was a convergent mixed method study. What we did was we offered a 5-day, 30-hour dance camp. And this dance camp was offered by 2 professional dancers, as well as myself and 2 graduate students who were knowledgeable in wheelchair skills training. The participants were 3 adolescent manual wheelchair users and 3 professional dancers. We collected data, quantitative data, the week before the camp started using the wheelchair skills test, the wheelchair self-efficacy or confidence using the WheelCon, as well as the WHOM to look at participants' goals related to wheelchair skills and wheelchair use. During the 5 days of the camp, every day started, or I should say that the professional dancers used the information gathered, this quantitative information, in order to develop the activities, the very specific activities for wheelchair dance, as well as the choreography. And so this dance camp was very tailored to the pediatric manual wheelchair users and their level of wheelchair skill and their goals. So every day started with the wheelchair dance training, followed by wheelchair skills training. So really watching how the pediatric manual wheelchair users were able to engage in the wheelchair dance, and then training the wheelchair skills required to be able to more effectively and efficiently do the wheelchair dance. Of course, lunch break, 90 more minutes of wheelchair dance, followed by more wheelchair skills training. Each day, we showed a short video of wheelchair dance, and then there was the cool down, the relaxation at the end of the session. And so that's how every day of the wheelchair dance camp went. And the final day, the Friday, the wheelchair users were able to share with their family and their friends the choreographed performance. The following week, we did the post-data collection using the same measures and also collected qualitative data with interviews and focus groups with the adolescent manual wheelchair users as well as the professional dancers. The 3 participants' manual wheelchair skills improved, and their improvement in wheelchair confidence was a little bit variable amongst the participants. The qualitative data really showed us that the participants got a lot out of this wheelchair dance camp. And so they talked about autonomy and mastery and how the mastery of certain wheelchair skills really transferred into their day-to-day life. So for example, one participant said, "The lateral movement, I learned how to use it. I did not really use it before, and now I can do a lateral movement to reach something." And so that's the sideways maneuvering skill that she's referring to in the wheelchair skills program. Another theme that came out was a theme around the sense of belonging and inclusion, and really the importance of the opportunity to meet peers living in the same situation and the opportunity to see new possibilities. And so one participant said, "We have things in common and we can share experiences. It's not every day you get a chance to meet other people in a wheelchair." And another participant said, "It inspires me to see all that is possible." And so these are really positive results for these pediatric manual wheelchair users. So some of the key findings are around the fact that this wheelchair dance camp provided meaningful activity for the children in order to help them engage in the process. The confidence they developed in the different wheelchair skills and in moving in their wheelchair helped them to be able to do the movement behaviors, the movements required for the dance. From those of us who were running the dance camp, we saw opportunities to increase the simplification and the progression of the skills and to also integrate additional skills beyond those identified by the pediatric manual wheelchair users during initial data collection. And we also felt that it would be important the next time around to include able-bodied dancers that were more at the same age as the children. The professional dancers were, I would say, in their early 20s, and the children were adolescents. And so there was a little bit of an age gap there. Having said all of that, the outcome of, in my opinion, the outcome of this dance camp was very positive. And I'm going to show a short video to you all, if it's going to function for me, so that you can get a sense of the accomplishments of these children in the dance camp. I won't show you the whole video. It's about 4.5 minutes. Maybe we'll get through 2 minutes of it. So this is a video of the choreographed performance.
We can't see it, Paula. We can't see the video. No.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Lee. I think I need to switch. Let's see. I will stop sharing and I will come back in. Let's see. Okay, can you see it now?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for letting me know. And so this is the final choreographed performance, or part of the final choreographed performance. This wheelchair user had developed a progressive neurological disease. She had danced prior to, as an able-bodied dancer prior to this dance camp, and she was really interested in being able to perform basic wheelchair skills to be able to engage in the dance process. This participant had been using her wheelchair for a number of years. She was really working on developing more community-based skills, such as popping her front casters, such as doing turns in place later. She was very engaged, very excited to be part of this dance camp. And so here you can see that she's accomplished the capacity to lift her front casters while moving forward in her wheelchair, which was very important for her. And our third participant had participated in a dance camp previously. Her goal for this dance camp was be able to move her wheelchair more fluidly to participate in the artistic nature of the dance moves. One of her specific wheelchair skills related goals was to be able to position her wheelchair back into the wheelie position in order to be able to participate. And you'll see that here momentarily. And so that gives you a little bit, I won't continue with the video for the sake of time, but that gives you a little bit of an idea of the type of performance, choreographed performance, that is the outcome of the dance camp, and the types of skills, the types of goals, and the types of skills that the children learned. Now, I believe I've come back to my PowerPoint presentation. Are you able to see a slide now that says address WSP knowledge synthesis challenges?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Thank you very much. So now we're moving on to sort of the next level of the triangle of the knowledge creation, that being knowledge synthesis. And so to address this challenge and concern from the occupational therapists in Montreal, we're currently in the process of conducting 2 reviews. One is the systematic review and the other is scoping review. The systematic review is looking at wheeled mobility use outcomes, and that's all types of outcomes, including wheelchair skills, also things like participation, different physical activity outcomes for using the wheelchair. And the specific questions for that review are, what are the outcome measures developed to evaluate wheelchair use among manual wheelchair users, powered wheelchair users, and scooter users? And what are the measurement properties of these identified outcome measures? We've submitted the protocol. We're at the protocol stage for this review, which has been submitted to the JBI journal. The second ongoing review, which we're still more or less at the protocol and data extraction stage, is specifically looking at the intervention characteristics of the wheelchair skills training program across populations and settings. The wheelchair skills training program is used with a variety of different populations of wheelchair users, as well as clinicians, as well as students. It's delivered in different settings in the community and rehab centers. It's delivered in different ways. It's delivered via boot camps, via one-on-one training. More recently, lots of virtual training happening. And so the purpose of this scoping review is really to look at the intervention characteristics, and we're using the TIDIER framework for that. And in terms of how the wheelchair skills training program is being delivered and the identified barriers and facilitators to its delivery. And so stay tuned for, that's all I'll say about these reviews, because we're still in very early stages, so we'll have to stay tuned for the results of these studies. But they hopefully will address the knowledge synthesis concerns identified by the clinicians, as we'll be able to pull out pediatric specific information from both of these reviews. So at the bottom of the triangle, the development, the knowledge creation triangle, the development of the knowledge tools and products. So this was, if you recall from earlier in the presentation, this was the concerns that the occupational therapist had around the wheelchair skills program manual, as well as the need for resources that were more pediatric friendly, that were more fun. And so we have 2 ongoing projects for that. The first, it's called WeeWheel. So within that project, we're developing and evaluating pediatric specific resources, and it's a qualitative study. And to address the Wheelchair Skills Program manual challenges, we've developed a Wheelchair Skills Program Pediatric Subcommittee, which is an international working group of experts that are working together to adapt the manual to be more user-friendly for pediatric rehabilitation. So in terms of the WeeWheel project, this is a large group of researchers and students from Dalhousie University, University of Montreal, University of Laval, University of Toronto, as well as many clinicians in Montreal and Quebec, as well as a patient partner. And the study is funded by the Child Bright Network. We're very fortunate to have groups of occupational therapy students, professional master's students who are very creative and very keen to develop these pediatric specific resources and then to evaluate them. And so this project's really been a series of small studies where groups of occupational therapy students are developing and gathering feedback on a series of resources. And so the objective of this study is to develop these pediatric specific resources, namely storybooks, instructional posters, and training workbooks, and to describe occupational therapists and pediatric manual wheelchair users' perceived satisfaction with the resources and their perception about the usability, relevance, and feasibility of these resources in pediatric settings. And so after development of the resources themselves with feedback from the team, the groups of students then collect additional feedback from the OTs, using focus groups and from children using semi-structured qualitative interviews. The idea is to have these resources go across the 30 skills that are included in the Wheelchair Skills Program for manual wheelchair users. To date, we have 3 different sets of resources. So again, by set, I mean the storybook, the posters, and the training workbook. The first set of resources includes skills, the skills of rolling forward, rolling backward, turns while moving forward, and reaching objects. The second set of resources includes getting through hinge doors, ascending and descending, slight inclines, maneuvering sideways, and turns in place. And then the third set is rolling on soft surfaces, getting over obstacles, and ascending and descending steep inclines. And so we're slowly making our way through the 30 wheelchair skills for manual wheelchair skills training. The students are very creative, as you can see from these resources. The first story is about Gab and his dog Pirouette seeing this castle far off in the distance in the forest and how to get to that castle. The next story is around being inside the castle with a friend that Gab has met and exploring inside the castle. And then the third story is around this pediatric manual wheelchair user receiving tickets to a concert and the obstacles in the physical environment that were encountered when attending the concert. So just to give you an idea of what these resources look like and how they're portrayed, in the storybook, one page is the story itself, and the page beside it is how to do, instructions on how to do that specific skill that's outlined in the story. So in this case, it's moving forward in the wheelchair, moving turns, moving forward. And then within the set of resources, there's the instructional posters. So this instructional poster incorporates components of the storybook. So for example, you can see that this is an apple on the wheel. They include things to help pediatric manual wheelchair users understand different techniques. So for example, to go from 10 to 2 in forward propulsion, we have clouds and a rainbow. Those types of things to make the posters more engaging, easier kind of tips for clinicians to use to train wheelchair skills and easier for children to remember. And then the training workbooks have children develop goals and segment the skills and put them into different levels so that children can get feedback and can get credit, so to speak, see their progression in moving through the skills, as they tend not to acquire these skills as quickly as adult wheelchair users. In terms of the second set of resources, it's exactly the same thing. So it's the story itself on one side, on one page, and then how to do the associated wheelchair skill on the next page. So in this example, it's providing the instructions on how to go through a door. You can see an instructional poster of how to breaking down how to maneuver sideways, because within the storybook, at one point, both of the wheelchair users were getting into a small elevator, and turns in place. So they also had to turn their wheelchair in place in order to get to a different place in the castle. And so again, you can see how the skills are segmented and broken down and into different levels where the child can succeed and be motivated to continue to refine and become more efficient with skills. And then the third set of resources is exactly the same. So here the child is about to go over an obstacle. And so within the story, to reach the merchandise booth here in the outdoor concert. And we're seeing here that on the next page breaks down how to do that skill. Similarly with the instructional poster, this one for descending steep inclines, and the training workbook. In this version of the training workbook, the OT students had the great idea of including different icons to identify the level of assistance that children need, whether it's physical, whether it's verbal tips or guidance, or whether it's simply supervision. We're continuing with this project. We do have another set of students that will be looking at developing a new storybook, new posters, and a new training workbook for more advanced wheelchair skills. And to date, we've received really great feedback from both the OTs and the pediatric manual wheelchair users in terms of their satisfaction with the resources, in terms of the playfulness, the colorfulness, the inclusion, breaking down the skills, the visual cues. The OTs felt like it was a turnkey resource. They wanted to start using them the next day and felt that it would really increase their efficiency of clinical practice to have these very specific and broken down resources. This is a bit of a reiteration of that. So it's a helpful resource for providing wheelchair skills training from the clinical standpoint and for children for learning the new wheelchair skills. And then in terms of addressing the clinician's perspective of the manual being very condensed and heavy and difficult to use, as I mentioned, we've developed a pediatric subcommittee with international experts from across Canada, from the States, from the Netherlands, from Argentina. So a group of pediatric wheelchair skills training experts, and they're really going through the wheelchair skills manual chapter by chapter and identifying where can we add pediatric specific considerations, where would we modify the content to be more specific to pediatrics. And the design that's being used for this group is a nominal group technique. And so prior to virtual meetings, all of the experts are reading the different chapters or pages in the manual that were provided and preparing their ideas. The silent idea generation of what we would add to the manual to make it more pediatric specific. And then within a virtual meeting itself, really having a round robin discussion of the different ideas, of the different input from the experience of these experts, discussing the ideas, and then I'm voting on what would make it into the manual and into the pediatric specific handbook. And of course, the next step of this process is to come back to the Wheelchair Skills Program Editorial Committee to get their feedback on the suggestions from this group. On the right-hand side of the page, you can see one page from the pediatric specific handbook that is currently under development and should be ready for use hopefully by the end of the summer or the end of September. So that concludes my presentation. If we come back to the learning objectives identified at the beginning of the presentation, I hope that those on the call are able to identify 3 positive impacts related to wheelchair skills training for children. For example, function, development, and participation. Able to list 3 important ingredients. I think it's become obvious in the presentation that it's really important to make wheelchair skills training for children fun. That is a bit of a no-brainer, but sometimes clinicians are unsure how to do that in an evidence-based way, to break skills down, to develop easy-to-use resources like those developed with the WeeWheel project, and to increase the evidence specific to pediatric manual wheelchair skills training. And then in terms of innovative approaches for delivering training, I think the incorporation into physical activities, a really great idea that we learned with the inclusive wheelchair dance camp. And then of course the resources are those that I just presented, the WeeWheel resources and the WSP Pediatric Specific Handbook. My email address is on this last slide. If there's anyone that's interested in collaborating on projects related to pediatric wheelchair skills training, please don't hesitate to let me know. I would be more than happy to engage in collaborations with others on this topic. And so I'll stop sharing at this point and come back to the Zoom where I can see everyone. If anyone has any questions or any comments, I am open to having a chat about this. I'm looking in the chat. I saw there was a chat, but it's just the evaluation of this session.
Maybe I'll start, Paula. Thank you. That was just an incredible body of work. And I just think it's so great to thank you so much for, we don't often get to see the pediatric world, and I think it gives us a really different lens. And even just the approach again with children, I think is a reminder of how to engage people in new mobility. What I was thinking is engaging people in new mobility when they're older, and this is new mobility for pediatric patients as well. But just looking at how you can use a piece of equipment to really engage in the things that you enjoy. I guess my question was with regards to the storybooks, which I think are just amazing. Or how are these applied? Are these books that the kids follow along with their occupational therapist, or is this parents or both, or is there, maybe. Yeah, that's my question.
Thanks, Suzanne. They're not currently in practice. They're still under development. So the feedback that we've been receiving in the focus groups and the interviews, there's great feedback. There's also constructive feedback in terms of how to make some small refinements. So we're still in the process of making those refinements, and they're currently in French. And so we're also translating to English, and we've had offers to translate to Spanish as well. And so once those aspects are completed, then they'll be in practice. But to more specifically answer your question, the feedback that we received from the OTs is that the storybooks themselves, from their perception, they could be used across the continuum of care. So a lot of times in pediatric rehab, there's the really big challenge with parents and children in terms of when to transition to a wheelchair. So oftentimes parents still want to use the stroller. They still have the hope that the child will be able to walk. And so using those storybooks and kind of seeing, okay, well, this is a kid in a forest. This is a kid playing with his friends. They're engaging in all of these fun activities. It's kind of a resource that could be used by physiatrists, could be used within those sort of initial appointments to discuss. Obviously, you're not going to read it in these appointments, but as a resource to complement what you're doing in these appointments, to kind of move forward in terms of the thinking of, hey, it's not necessarily a bad thing to have to transition into a wheelchair. There's a whole world out there, and we can make that. We can train children how to use their wheelchairs in order to be able to engage in those activities that they want to engage in. The other thing that the OTs talked about is using it at daycare, using it in the school system, like really kind of across the board. And the posters were things, I know that the OTs that work in the school system in Montreal, they want to put it on the walls at school, friendly reminders, when you propel forward, do it this way. Just little cues for the wheelchair users themselves, as well as for anyone in the school who's helping the children to get from point A to point B. Kind of a reminder of, maybe don't help them if they don't need help, or if you do want to help them, point out the technique. And so the idea is that those posters could be used in schools, rehab centers, community centers, at home. And then the training workbooks, of course, could go across the healthcare professional team in terms of going, okay, here's the goals, and here's where the child's at right now in terms of the goals. What I really like about what the students did is the segmentation. Because oftentimes it's like, okay, well, I can't do a wheelie yet. Okay, that's okay, because you're done this, this, and this component of the wheelie. So anyway, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it really does. Thank you. Thank you. Lee has a question.
Yeah, well, a comment and a question. Well, just a couple of comments, really. It's so exciting, Paula, to see, and what a great presentation that was, of putting together such a body of work. And I'd love to go on and talking about wheelchair skills, but I'm not going to do that. You've contributed so much already to that. But for the purposes of this round, which is kind of a focus on rehab research methodology, I think what you've demonstrated is a great example of how a research program is different than a research project. A program consists of a lot of specific projects. It's like the pieces in a jigsaw puzzle, trying to paint the picture, but also not just adding to the body of knowledge, but with your use of the knowledge to action cycle, which you've been using now for quite some time with geriatrics at one point. That this can be a way of organizing your thoughts and picking the next series of projects to do, and so implementation science and knowledge translation is such a great example of all of those things. So thank you so much for that, and we're delighted to have you back in Halifax.
Thank you, Lee.
Oh yeah, today is not a great day.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you, Diane, for your comment in the chat.
Hey, I'm just going to say that was really excellent, Paula. It's Kim. And
Thanks,
just piggybacking on what Suzanne said. I mean, one of the thoughts I think with the adult population, we've done such a great job on focusing on the skills and the training and the knowledge translation to an adult population. But I think the one element that maybe we've been missing a little bit is the fun aspect. And when I was watching that, I was thinking, it's like dance isn't exclusive to children, right? And I wonder if, moving forward, there's some ways that we can engage a little bit more with rec therapy. And I don't know how you go about identifying, I don't know, I think of Breton, but like someone in the community who has knowledge of wheelchairs, and even just doing a little small pilot and bringing someone in and trying to merge a little bit of that fun dance, but also having an opportunity to engage caregivers and their partners, whatever, in learning some skills at the same time. So I love this presentation because it made me kind of reflect and look at all the work that Lee and the group has done and go, like, we've done so much, but just because they're adults doesn't mean we can't do a little bit of fun too. And maybe it would be fun to try to implement something like that into a project moving forward. Just an idea. I'm certainly not the one because I'm a horrible dancer. So, but I'm sure we can find someone. I'm sure we can find someone who has the skills, and maybe as well from a recruitment perspective. Like, I mean, I think pediatrics, you're dealing with a smaller population, but you've been doing an excellent job in, trying to get the numbers, but we do struggle, like the couple of the last studies, and I know COVID was a part of it, but just getting the numbers in terms of getting the participants and caregivers. And maybe if we kind of take a slightly different approach and try to do something with a little bit more fun, and as a bonus, you're also going to learn some new wheelchair skills as part of participating in this activity.
Yeah, Sarah Moore on the call too, from the recreation perspective. I think that's probably music to her ears to be hearing what you're saying, Kim.
Absolutely, Sarah.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Lee. Yeah. Yeah, we have quite a few programs right now with Easter Seals Nova Scotia. And so we have a learn to dance, we have a learn to ride, learn to wheel, learn to sledge, learn to power chair soccer, and a few others. And so, so certainly our job is to make these skills fun. And I think that it's such, working with the Wheelchair Skills Research Team, it's been so lovely to be able to think about those ways to integrate meaningful movement into people's lives. And people want to dance. People want to, be able to go for a walk with their families in the woods and do all of these things. And so this is where we can really think about strategies to be able to make these rehab moments enjoyable.
Thanks, Sarah. Absolutely. And the dance camp was a super interesting experience for me last year. The the professional dancers, obviously they have their routine, they have their way of doing a dance camp, and even the words they use, the terms they use, the process they use, I was like, what does that mean? So we're going to spend 20 minutes exploring, okay, but what exactly does that mean within the context of dance? So it really took us, I was definitely really shy at first because Kim, me as well, I can't dance very well. So at first I'm like, okay, what am I doing? But really, how do we seamlessly integrate the wheelchair skills training into this? And we became substantially more adept at that over the course of 5 days. And so I would love to have the opportunity to run a very similar dance camp here and really, improve it based on what we learned last summer. It was really an exciting experience. And the student, Beatrice Ouellette, who's a PhD student at University of Laval, was a superstar with that program. And she is planning to come here at some point and do a postdoc. So maybe we can engage her in that process when she gets here. Sarah, maybe
And
we
Paula,
can talk further. Yeah.
Yeah, well, so we've been doing the Learn to Dance program for quite some time at the Maritime Conservatory, and the director of dance at the Maritime Conservatory, her son is a pediatric wheelchair user and is engaged in all of our programs. So she's very in tune to making sure that there are inclusive program opportunities, and then we come in and run the programs alongside some of her professional volunteers. And so, yeah, we absolutely can make this work here, and we can definitely chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, research can be fun.
Absolutely.
Any other questions? I just want to also comment too about Sarah and, oh, sorry, Sarah, do you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just going to echo that. I just really enjoyed the overview, Paul. I know we work a lot together, but to really see it all put together was, it's really something. So I'm just really so proud of the accomplishments that you and your team have been able to provide to the pediatric wheelchair skills community, and so excited to continue working together. So really well done today. It was a really nice overview.
Thanks, Sarah. And of course, you're involved in the research projects. Lee and I have been working together since '99. This is a lot of people participated in all these different projects that I presented today. It's definitely a team effort. Thanks again, Suzanne, for this opportunity to be with you all today and to share some of the ongoing work.
Oh, it was great. And like Lee said, it was a wonderful overview of just how a research, more than a research project kind of comes together. So thanks so much. All right. Okay. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Paula.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, folks.